All right, guys, we are live again. I'm a little bit late because I had to get some food and I was doing some extra work from my 9 to 5. And I still actually have to do some work after this video, right? And then I have to make the food that I got. But in today's video, we're going to talk about the moment I knew money was important. Now, I'm not like a big everything's about money and things like that. I'm not a big material person. I do like nice things, but it's not all about the material stuff for me. For me, the reason why I made the channel Financial Nutrition is to give out tips and tricks on how to be better with money. And what's part of that is actually growing the money you have. So it's just part of being good with money. But it doesn't necessarily mean make the most money and think about money 24/7 and everything's about money. But, if we're realistic, everything that we do on a daily basis is tied to money, right? You go out to eat. I just went to the grocery store, right? So I had to pay money for that. To get to the grocery store, I had to use my car, right? I had to pay for my car. The car takes gas. The car needs insurance, right? So everything that you do, everything that you touch basically has money involved. So it's kind of hard to ignore it. You could ignore it, but most people that do that are either stressed out and they're always thinking about, oh, how am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to do this? And, the whole goal is to get to a point where you don't really need to think about that stuff, right? You don't need to be the richest person, but you don't want to be a person that's living paycheck to paycheck and worrying about how you're going to pay for this and how you're going to pay for that, right? All right, so the moment that I knew that money was important is, so I'm originally from Connecticut, right? From Bridgeport, Connecticut. For most of you, you probably don't know that. I don't think I ever mentioned that on the channel. And it's not such a good place. It's up north. Connecticut is up north. It's next to New York. And if you've never lived up north, the skies are not, I live in Florida now, the skies are not as nice. It's very gloomy, like foggy. And people don't really take, from where I was from, people don't really take care of the community, right? So growing up, I basically saw a bunch of, just a not so nice environment, right? Stuff on the floor. People were not really that educated, or, going to college wasn't really a thing. So, like, I would say, I'm not going to say I grew up in the most dangerous area, but again, it wasn't the nicest area, right? So, but yeah, so I grew up in Connecticut, in Bridgeport, I would say from when I was born to like 11. Now, what would happen is my grandma actually moved to Florida, right? She actually was the first person to move to Florida, the first person in our family to move to Florida. And during the summer, when I had summers off of school, I would fly down to Florida. And man, like you could at that time, Florida's getting a little bit crowded now. Like even the Tampa area is getting big. They have this other city called Wesley Chapel, and it's getting pretty populated. But it's still a nice place, right? Like if you fly into Florida, you'll see that if you're flying from up north, you'll definitely see the difference in quality of air. I would definitely say that. There's definitely a difference in quality of air. It just feels like, if you ever been to New York, that's the same feeling that I get, or that you would get if you lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's just like gloomy all the time. The air is not that good. It just feels dirty, right? So I would fly to Florida every summer to visit my grandma and just spend the summer in Florida. Now, this was when I was 13, right? So I'm 30 now. This was 7 years ago. Now, Florida back then, for those of you who don't know, was such a, like, it wasn't as populated as it was now. And there wasn't a lot of, I'm not going to say there wasn't a lot of stores, but it wasn't as developed as it is now, right? And at the time, my grandma actually bought a house in a very nice neighborhood. She ended up flipping her house in Connecticut and ended up making a lot of money on that, and was able to buy a pretty nice house in the community that she was living in Florida at the time. And, the houses in that neighborhood, now they're going for like upwards to 800 to over $1 million. But at the time, I think she paid like 265 or 275. But at the time, that was very expensive for those type of homes in that community, right? The community had an 18-hole golf course, and they had and this was all new to me, right? Like an 18-hole golf course, you don't see that in Connecticut. So it was one of those things where it was a shock coming from Bridgeport and seeing all these nice things in Florida, right? So seeing those, that like the community she lived in, and it wasn't like the community there was like, so it was a whole community, and then within the community there's like subdivisions, right? So like her subdivision wasn't filled with the most like expensive homes, but within the whole community in general, which we had access to because you were able to walk around, like I saw $1 million homes, right, at the age like 12, 13, or close to $1 million homes. And right, like and I would say that was the moment for me that I knew money was important, right? Because you have to think about it. I'm coming from Bridgeport, where I was living in an apartment. It was like, it was me, my brother, my sister, then my her husband, and then my mom, right? Or I said her husband, my mom's husband, not my sister's husband. So it was like 5 to 6 people in like a 2-bedroom apartment. And, up north, the apartments, like the square footage of the apartments were not that nice, right? And I don't even think we had like central air conditioner at the time. I think, yeah, we didn't. So, we didn't have central air conditioner. Our heat, like for the heat, we had to have people come and put gas into the apartment complex for us to get heat, because obviously up north during the winters it got cold. And then also, I'm trying to think what I was going to say. Yeah, the square footage of the apartment was just not that big. So you got to think about it. 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, obviously things got tight. And I shared a room with my brother, so it was even more tighter. So think about it. Me going, like in the summer, going to Florida, big house. My grandma didn't. It was just my grandma and my grandpa. So at the time, it was basically a free house, or not a free house, an empty house, because it was just them two, and then me and my brother would come for the summer. So that was the trigger for me, right? And just to get to the point, so I was able, every summer I would come to Florida and I would see all these nice things. Just the air was better. The schools were better. I noticed that because I would meet people in the community that went to the schools, and that ultimately made me move to Florida with my grandma prior to my mom actually moving to Florida. So, seeing all those things at that early age, you got to think about it too. And again, it was real early age. At that age, I was able to decide, like, okay, I don't want to stay in because all the people back in Bridgeport that I know, they're not doing like they have no degree. Some people don't even have their license in Bridgeport, right? They're not doing anything. It's almost like it was just an environment where nobody was doing anything. Nobody wants to prosper. And even if I go back to my old neighborhood today, people are doing the same thing, right? It's almost like it's just one of those places where people don't grow. People just want to stay stuck. They don't look outside their community. They're just doing the same thing for years and years and years. And yeah, it was just a different view of life when I used to visit for the summer, and that was my trigger. That was the moment that I found that money was important, right? Because I was like, dang, to live in those type of homes, you must need a lot of money, right? And being in Bridgeport, you never saw those type of homes, you never saw those type of communities. So it was an eye-opening experience, and it was one of those things where it's like, when I get a chance to to make some money, I'm going to make sure I make the most of it and learn how to manage my money. That way, eventually, I could live in a community like this or live in a home like this, and yeah, just do better, right? And then I eventually ended up moving with my grandma when I was 13 or 14. I think it was like middle school time. And yeah, I just finished out school, high school. I ended up getting a scholarship in high school to go to USF, University of South Florida. I ended up getting my finance degree. And just the whole trajectory of my life, I think, changed just from making that move early on. I was 13, 14, right? But, to see, it's almost like seeing like a kid seeing Disney on TV, but not actually being to Disney World. But the first chance they get to go to Disney, they're gonna do it. And funny enough, there's a Disney actually in Florida, right? So, but yeah, so the whole point of it is, I think for most of you, if you haven't had like that trigger moment where you see people prospering, you see people doing better, whether it's on TV, the internet. I think right now it's easier to see that type of life. I think it was harder back then because we didn't really have YouTube back then. And the TV was kind of like make believe to us, like, right? It wasn't really something. The TV back then was all like celebrities, or like, from what I was like, the way I thought about it was like, oh, those are people on TV. You could never be there. It's just all fantasy stuff. It's just like for entertainment. But now I feel like since we have YouTube, we have the internet, people can be exposed to different parts of the world and get motivation to do better financially, right? And that's basically what made me do better, or made me aspire, or made me aware of why money's important. Because, and again, it's not about, living in a fancy home or living in a good neighborhood. Yes, that's nice, but it's just better quality living, right? Just having options, right? It's more about having options and not being constrained to one thing. And I feel like in Bridgeport, people, they're still doing the same thing today, right? Still going to the corner stores every weekend, still drinking every weekend. I used to see people drink every weekend, right? I'll have, every now and then I have some wine, but I actually cut back on that as well. But it's just the environment that you're in that will trigger you to understand why money is important, and understand, once you start, valuing your money and what it could do for you, that's when you start to take it serious, right? But I think most people today, there's a lot of content on the internet, right? You have entertainment, you have finance stuff, and there's a few. I mean, I would say there's a handful of finance YouTubers that get notoriety, and they get noticed and stuff like that. But for the most part, what you see on YouTube getting the most clicks is the day in the life, the silly stuff, right? The stuff that's really not going to get you anywhere. And I think if people start exposing themselves to the possibilities, they can start to prosper financially, because it's almost like you need that motivation. And it's kind of, I would say too, it's easier and it's harder these days because you are exposed to so much nice stuff that it almost becomes common that you don't feel like you need to work for it. Which, like, and for me back then, it was like the ghetto, and then it was nice Florida, sunny weather, nice houses. It was like, oh, I want this, right? I experienced that. I know I don't want that, and then I see this, and I'm like, okay, I want to, work towards this, right? And that was at an early age. So, yeah, I think people need to, whatever you listen to on a daily basis, whether it's videos, whether it's, your post on Instagram, whether it's Twitter, whether it's TikTok, try to expose yourself to, I'm not going to say more expensive things, but, better quality of living, more, just expose yourself to more opportunities, right? So you can see the world and see that. And then that will, at least for me, that triggered me to say, okay, if I want these options that are available out here, I'm going to have to make some money so I could be exposed to those options, right? So, yeah, I think, that was the moment for me that I realized that money was important, right? And even today, I still have that same fire. Obviously now because I'm doing the YouTube channel, but even before the YouTube channel, I was always trying to, figure out how to make more money, right? And it's going to be a process. You're not going to. I remember. So from 2013, when I was in college. Yeah, so 2013 to 2015, I tried day trading. That didn't work out. I tried to do, start up a business on Shopify, the drop shipping, all that stuff. So you got to figure out what works for you and see what you're really good at or what, meshes with your personality. Because just because somebody else is doing, or if you pay for a course, doesn't mean you are going to be able to do the same thing that person did, right? Maybe you got to go down a different lane. Sometimes you can't do copy what somebody else doing and does and get that same result. Sometimes you can, but it's very rare, right? And even if you do the same thing somebody does, you still got to throw your own twist to it to actually make it work. It's just for me, I've bought a bunch of courses. I've done, a lot of those seminars and all that stuff. And I even, putting my own twist to it is still going to be a rough ride. Right. But again, it's all about exposing yourself to those opportunities. And once you expose yourself to those opportunities, you're going to see what's available to you, and you're going to say, okay, I'm really not doing much. A lot of you are just, working the 9 to 5, and then after work, you're not doing anything else, and you're not putting any time into anything else that's going to grow your wealth. Because most of us, again, your job is not like if I asked you, okay, what are the 5 things you want to do most? Maybe you say travel to this place, travel to that place, and maybe your job could get you to those things every other year, right? One of those expensive trips. But for the most part, and now I'm just talking about trips. What about, a nice home, stuff like that? Most of the time, maybe if you have a high-paying job, you're able to get that stuff. But for most people, their 9 to 5 is not going to get them where they want to be financially. So you have to be working on stuff outside of that, right? But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. I think most people need to figure out what their financial triggers are. And once you find out what your and when I say financial triggers, what's going to trigger you to excel financially, right? Now, I'm not saying you have to go out there and be, make tens of millions of dollars or become a billionaire, but what gets you going financially? Is it looking at a new house, right? Or is it looking at that car that you want, or that vacation that you want to go to? Now, it's nice to look, because I know some people that all they do is the motivational stuff. They're like, yeah, that motivates me, but then they end up doing nothing, right? It's more of just to, it's a reminder, okay, what you're working towards. So as you're working, you need those financial triggers to, make you understand why you're actually working towards that thing, your why, right? You need to figure out, everybody says you need to figure out your why, figure out why you want to do it. And once you figure that out, then it's going to be easier to achieve those financial goals, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it today. I'm going to get on, and I actually have, I'm not gonna say what it is because I don't like to say it, and then I have to live up to it. So I'm just gonna keep it on the low. But I'm actually working on something, another platform. But that's gonna be, I'll probably mention that later down the line. But yeah, let me see. I'm gonna do a live Friday, and yeah, start back up Monday. But yeah, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.